Episode 18 of the Bmoney Beastin podcast. I am here with basically a legend in our parts, right? Like, you're a legend, Keefe.
A local hero.
Local hero. Dude, no, you're selling yourself short, bro. You're legit an NCAA All-American, so you're not just a local hero, dude. You're a national, like, you're a guy. And the thing that before I introduce you real quick, I'll say this. Somebody asked me today, they're like, I was talking about Nick Perler, where I'd interviewed Nick Perler. And there's like, do you think, like the younger generation, like even knows about these guys? I was like, well, that's partially what I'm doing here, right? Yeah. I want them to tell their stories because there's a lot of studs from the past, man, that have done amazing, miraculous things. And dude, you're one of them. So I'm here with Michael Keefe. We went to the same high school. We're from the same town. He was a two-time state champ in the state of Georgia and an NCAA All-American in 2005. You've been coaching now for 15 years?
Yeah, about 16 years, roughly, yeah.
At one time, you were at Dalton. We'll get to all that. But I want to start with the twin thing, okay?
Yeah.
There's been such a debate, man. Do you know Brandon Bruner? Have you ever met Brandon Bruner?
Yeah, I was just talking about him yesterday with one of my old wrestlers, Luis Juan. Yeah, we were talking about him. Wrestled at Baylor?
Yeah.
Stud, yeah, he's really good.
Brandon, man, he brought up on the podcast a few weeks ago, and it's been like a running kind of theme now. He's like, dude, he goes, have you ever seen a twin that's bad at wrestling? And I was like, He said, I said, to think about it, and I brought up you and Josh, and then I brought up the Bickertons in Ohio that are like killers right now. And I'm like, dude, you're right. And then Brandon looks at me and he goes, dude, he goes, if you got a twin, you can't say well they're bigger or their arms are longer or they're the same.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's an interesting point. And this is another key point. You didn't start wrestling till late either, right?
Yeah, started wrestling in ninth grade, which is late in the wrestling game, to start.
Right, to get to where you got. See, Pitts argued with me here a few weeks ago. I said, dude, they started in ninth grade. No, it was before that, man. I was like, no, dude, they started in high school. He's like, no, it was like 7th, 8th grade.
Yeah, it was funny. Me and Josh always loved to fight. We watched every Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, anything we could get at Blockbuster that was a fight movie. So we were always fighting each other and just kind of wrestling around. But high school was the first time we ever stepped onto a mat. And Billy Broom came to us in the lunchroom and he said, hey, what are you guys doing after school? And we had no direction in life. I was going to probably drop out of high school. And he said, hey, man, why don't you guys try wrestling? And open room practice, first day, we were awful. We had no idea. They were asking us, what's your best takedown? I'm like, what's a takedown? What's your best shot? And I'm like, I don't know what's a shot. And they're trying to explain stuff to me. And but just that we did like a live match in a practice and it was intense. It was crazy. And I remember walking out of there thinking like, this is the greatest sport on earth. How is it? I've never heard of really, much about wrestling. You don't really get exposed to it in the South back then, especially. It was a football thing, and that was it.
Dude, when I first met Phil Daniel in middle school, he was my position coach of the football team, and he's like, hey man, you want to wrestle? And I went and I thought Rey Mysterio, whatever. And I think, the same thing happened with Bryson years later when he was like 5 or 6. And he's like, hey, man, what should my name be? Like it's a common like theme that you think wrestling, you think like WWE, whatever.
Yeah.
And dude, like we talk about it in different avenues. Like last night, Muggsy, Bulljunk, and Caden Henschel had that big match for Beat the Streets, right?
Yeah.
And those two are probably the biggest like social media influencers in the world right now in the sport of wrestling. They probably have like 8 million combined followers on all their platforms and all that. And you look at it, Caden Henschel's yet to, I think, even place at D2 Nationals. He may have placed, but he hadn't won one. And then you got a guy that didn't even wrestle in college, and they're the two like staples of the sport of wrestling, and it just blows your mind, right?
Yeah.
But then you look at it, you wonder why. Like, if me and you, like, we're just hanging out and we go to a random high school and we watch a duel, right? Like 2 random high schools. We have no emotional investment there, right? Like at all. We're just watching 2 guys wrestle or 14 matches or whatever. And those two, what made that kind of special over the past few weeks, and I kind of kept track and I kind of shared a lot of stuff, is they sold it so well, right? Like the build, like a Conor McGregor fight, like the build. And I think there needs to be more of that. And I think with more of that, we'll bring more people's attention to the sport. Yeah. But I kind of got off track there a little bit. Yeah, man, like starting in 9th grade, like now Matthew Pitts, when you see this, I was right, by the way. But when you start in 9th grade and you're like, 9th grade, dude, you know, you're 15, right? Like, yeah. And you're like, what's a takedown? What's a shot? You're like, and then you fast forward, what, not even 7 years later? It wasn't even that long, was it? 6, 7 years later?
Yeah, about 6, 7 years later. Yeah.
And you place in the toughest tournament in the world, right? For folk style wrestling.
Yeah.
Dude, explain to me that process, right? Like, when did you start, like, did you ever start branching out from like Ringgold and training other places? And
it was such a God thing from the very beginning. Like, this crazy story. Before me and Josh even started wrestling, when we were about 11 years old, our mom took us to a church in Dalton. We lived in Ringgold, but we would travel to different churches with my mom and my uncle Mike. And this lady came up to us. We were at a charismatic church. People were praying together and stuff at the end of service. And this old lady walks up to us and she says, "Hey, God wants me to tell you something." And me and my brother are sitting there. And if you saw me and Josh at 11 years old, you think we're not athletic now. Look at us back then. We just look like, you know, typical nerd twins. And she said, "Come here." And she brought us to the front of this church. And she said, "God showed me something." She said, "You two guys are going to compete at a sport one day." And she said, "You're going to be some of the very best at it. You're going to be some of the best around. You're going to be the, you know, top of the country." And she said, "Before all of your events, you guys are going to get together and you're going to take hands and you're going to pray together before your matches." And she said, "People are going to be witnessing your prayers and they're going to be drawn to God because of your prayers together." And I remember at the time we never played sports. And for years we didn't compete in any sports. You know, I mean, we played basketball in 3rd grade, but, you know, it was like we weren't athletes. And I had almost forgotten. And I just remember that moment stood out to me, that when somebody says, "God showed me something about you," you know, it's just like, wow, I wonder what it is. And, you know, as in high school, we started going to church. But I didn't get born again until I was about 18, right after my senior year of high school. You know, I got my heart broken and found salvation, became a born again Christian right before I went to UTC. And my prayer life and Josh's prayer life, we were praying together before all of our matches. And I had forgotten about this woman's prophecy kind of. It'd been on the back burner, you know. And but before all of our matches, we'd be praying together and we'd be like, "God, free us of fear, free us of doubt." And we'd be just saying these prayers behind this, you know, out behind the curtains. And people started coming and praying with us. And it was before a home match in McClellan Gym. Me and Josh were praying before a match and people started praying with us. And I looked at Josh and I was like, "Oh my gosh, do you remember that old lady in the church who told us that?" You know, and it was just funny. It was like God's had his hand in our lives, this, you know, all the way through. The fact that I was born with an identical twin who's a built-in wrestling partner, you know, just the drive that he gave us to do it. Because once I realized, I went to the state tournament my freshman year and I didn't know what the state tournament was. I didn't understand, you know, I was so new to the sport that it was like, I'm trying to win to qualify for something, but what, you know. And then we went to the Coliseum down there in Rome and I watched the state finals. And that's when I realized you get to be the champion of your weight class, you know. And I watched Matthew Pitts and Luke Raby and Danny McCullough and all these wrestlers that were just, to me, the best of the best. And, you know, especially Matthew Pitts, who wins a state title. Tech falls in the finals, Tech pins in the finals, and didn't give up a takedown an entire season. You know, I mean, it was just like Dan Gable type of stuff. And these guys are right here. And I remember that moment in that gym going, I'm going to be a state champion next year. I've got to be a state champion. You know, it's just like, it was one of those moments of like, I have to do this. So me and Josh, I started pulling him along like, hey, we're working out every day. And the fact that we had Billy Broom at Ringgold High School step in as the head coach my sophomore year. And, you know, Coach McDaniel, Steve McDaniel was there, who had a huge history of building great teams that were just full of state champions, you know. And it was such a crazy, I don't ever think it's a coincidence anymore looking back that we had guys like Josh Flynn, 3-time state champion, won it as a freshman, should have been a 4-timer. He was right around my size. Me and him were just always wrestling together. And Josh, me and him wrestled so much. I couldn't tell you, and you talk about Phil Daniel. Phil Daniel used to go running late at night, and me and Josh were always breaking into wrestling rooms. So we would sneak into the old wrestling room that used to be above the old weight room in the baseball field house over there. I don't know if the tornado knocked it all down, but yeah, we'd break into that place, and Phil Daniel would come in like 11 o'clock and look around and see us, and then just close the door and just keep us, he never said, "Hey, get out of here. What are you doing?"
just look the other way.
Yeah. But yeah,
dude, Phil, man, like he, now that I've been, I just kind of dabbled. I wasn't great, right? And
yeah,
but I've been around it so long now because of Bryson, like even like in depth with it, that looking back on it, where I thought he was absolutely off his rocker, he had a unique method to his madness.
Yeah.
But then you ask some of the guys that were with him for as long as they were, and they're like, I don't know, man. So he's just a unique cat. But that's pretty cool to say that, where it's like we broke into there to work out, and he just kind of looked the other way. That's pretty cool, right? I would have never known that.
Yeah.
So you didn't win state though until your junior year, right?
Yeah, my second year wrestling. I don't know if Pitts told you this, but Matthew Pitts was my state finals match my sophomore year. So
I think you told me this, and
yeah, it was funny. I watched him like tech pin in the finals, and I'm thinking this guy's the best of the best. Nobody can beat him. But going into my sophomore year, I had trained all summer long, 4, 5, 6 hours a day. I was obsessed. Me and Josh we put mats down in our basement, and we were wrestling at night. It was just one of those obsessions where we were determined to just be the greatest of all time. And I remember thinking, I'm going to beat everybody. I'm going to win 3 state titles. I already knew that's what I'm going to do. Right. And as we start getting closer to season and weight classes start lining up, Barrett Blankenship was looking like he couldn't make 130. And I was planning on going 35, but it was like, he's a few pounds heavier than me. And Coach Broom says, I want you to go 130. And I'm like, sure, I can. It's going to suck, but I can cut down from, like, back then you'd cut from 150 to 130 and almost die. It was just the way he did it. So I cut down to 130, and then I find out Matthew Pitts is at 130, and I'm like, now I got to beat this legend. I'm like, I'm gonna. I was still determined to do it, but it was like it was a mental battle where I didn't fully believe in myself, and I put him up there as like unbeatable, and by the time we met up twice that year, or no, once that year in a tournament, and he destroyed me. I mean, I was just not even there. I was like, this is Matthew Pitts, but wrestling him taught me so much because he was so slick, and I felt like I could never get a hold of him, and the technique and the way he misdirects everything, it was like a bull versus a matador, and he just made me look dumb. And I thought, wow, and Coach Broom, our style was always hand fight, break people, snap, push, pull, and Pitts just showed me there was another level to this game, and really changed how I wrestled. And then we, ended up getting to wrestle together at UTC, which was a huge blessing.
I want to get to that, and I want to know about how y'all did in the room together and stuff like that. Because Quantal, he's our partner in Bmoney Beastin.
Oh man, I love him. Yeah.
Yeah, and he actually created everything you see behind me.
He is the man when it comes to art and designs.
At D Langford Studio, for anybody who wants to follow him, at D Langford Studio. Dude, the guy, he and Pitts even said this a few weeks ago. He says, man, he goes, Quantal had the worst year of brands. He said he had the worst year. He had the cleaning house year. And then I text Quantal after mine and Pitt's episode, and I said, dude, is that for real? You had the worst year? He said, dude, Brands told me that, like, he's doing it on purpose to run people off.
Yeah, I think we started out with 52 wrestlers, and by the end of season, it was down to like 15. I mean, a large – and Coach Brands didn't care if you were the returning SoCon champion, if you were a blue-chip athlete. If you didn't follow his program and you were out drinking, he was like, see ya. And, we had all these guys on full scholarships just walking the streets because they were kicked off the team because they weren't doing the right things. And with Brands, he had the idea you don't compromise. If you're here to wrestle, and if it's wrestling season, that's what you're doing. And I really admire that. It's like there's certain standards you don't break, even if it costs you a duel. He didn't care, and we ended up being a great team. And because of that, we were beating Ohio State and beating Missouri because he put us through such a rigorous and it was intense. And I can remember pits, like somebody was talking about, what was the toughest practice you remember? And I can remember the morning workouts. You're trying to get woken up, and you're coming down the hallway in the McKenzie Arena, and you just hear the people in the workout. We did workouts in sessions, like 5 guys in session A, 10 guys in session B, and you would hear those people screaming and crying in the first session as you're walking up, and you're like, "Oh, I'm next. And you just knew it. And I remember one morning it was Matthew Pitts, and I'm like, if they're making Pitts cry, I don't want to go in there.
Dude, I seen some of the clips, man, that Matt posted, and you're in them, right?
Yeah.
You're in them. And it might have been you guys, because I seen a highlight tape of Matt, too, that somebody posted, like 3 doors down in the background. It was, like, super cool. But I seen some of that, man, running through the McKenzie Arena up there's 95 bleachers high, and pull, these circuit workouts. Dude, it looked intense just sitting at a computer watching on YouTube. So I can only imagine.
And that was the stuff they're allowed to share on YouTube. Chattanooga's got all these mountains and hills everywhere. And I remember Lee Fullhart, who beat Kel Sanderson, by the way. Lee Fullhart, multiple times he beat Kel Sanderson, was one of the assistant coaches out there. And I remember asking him, because I always thought Dan Gable's practices had to be the hardest thing you could ever do. And Fullhart wrestled for Gable, and I said, Lee, man, Coach Fullhart, were practices this hard at Iowa? I couldn't imagine practices being this hard anywhere. And he's like, heck, no, man. He's like, we didn't have this many hills, and our arena wasn't this steep. He's like, this guy's he's training you guys like in a way that was just crazy. I mean, it was unheard of. I don't know if any Division I coach had ever put their wrestlers through that. But, Brands was coming off of the 2000 Olympics, very fresh. He's still exercising those demons and trying to. He
was still pissed off from winning. Yeah.
That bronze medal hurt him. And he a lot of that he wanted us to remember, hey, if you don't do this, it could happen to you too.
Dude, I want to keep going into UTC because I think it's fascinating. But I want to cover your junior and senior seasons real quick of high school before we get full-blown into the Terry Brands experiment.
Yeah.
I'm getting this from so many different people, Pitts and Kiwantal, and now you. Eventually, we need to have like a group episode and just talk about Brands, because I think it would be epic. But so you had the match with Matt. It didn't go well. Then you lost in the state finals as a sophomore, which for anybody that sees this that doesn't understand what we're talking about, Matthew Pitts runs Grindhouse Wrestling in North Georgia and Chattanooga. He's the middle school coach at McCallie now. He won the Southern Conference, and he was an NCAA qualifier. And he's literally one of the baddest dudes, even today.
And super humble, though. You would never know.
Right.
After he beat me in the state finals, he's like, hey, man, you'll get it next year. His dad was like, hey, you'll get your shot. They were just I was like, man, the fact that I can be your opponent and you can treat me like your best friend after the match. Like, hey, you get your chance. I was like, that's what, a great champion is made out of, those kind of guys.
He's a dude. I love Matt. I've known him now for 8 or 9 years, I guess. And dude, he is a humble guy, but he's got a way about him. And I brought that up one time to him, even I think on the podcast there. Like if you watch the episode with me and Matt, I brought up to where we've had our rifts over the years. And dude, I remember when Bryson was little, he'd get taken down or something, and I'd scream at him, and Matt would be like, "Shut the f up, get out of here!" and but in the moment, it would piss me off. But then after about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm like, dude, he's right, he's right, and he's always had a great way of managing situations. I mean, if you look at what he's done at the middle school at McCallie, dude,
or just at Grindhouse, man, he has produced absolute studs. I mean, you got guys like Hunter Nolan, Striker Woods, Jackson Wells, these guys that trained under Pitts coming to high school level and just taking over. I mean, Ollie Webb, some of these guys. I mean, I could just keep listening to these. But yeah, Pitts has got a gift for coaching, man. I mean, as gifted as he was at wrestling, his coaching is on another level.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic. So that happened, and I didn't know he was so humble about it, but shout out to Matt. So you go into your junior year. I'm sure you were disappointed off of that loss, right? You're like,
yeah,
3. But okay, now, it's I think Matt told me this too before, that Brands would always say, get the next best thing, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's okay, I can get 2. So was that like laser focused? That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, it was a interesting, like, I think some people, when they get motivated and they want to win, that feeling, that hunger kind of goes away when you get home, and it goes away the next day. But with me, and my brother was really, my freshman year, my brother was ineligible the second half. So he only wrestled through December. And then back then you didn't come in the room. So my brother finished third in state that year, and he got beat in the first round and had to wrestle all the way back for third place. And I mean, went through like 9 matches. Back then there was no match 5 limit rule. I mean, he wrestled probably 10 matches in a day and a half, and back to back to back, and wrestled all the way to third place. And so me and him coming home, we were like, we're winning next year. And I remember Monday being back in the wrestling room, training again, and Coach Broom walked up to the top of the stairs and looked at us. And I remember him shaking his head, and he's like, y'all not going to lose again, are you? I mean, it's just, it motivated us that much more to be that close. And it hurt because I wanted to be a 3-time state champ. And I can remember just crying in the bathroom after I lost, thinking, nobody, I should have never beat Matthew Pitts. And he was way on a different level. But to me, I always thought like, oh, I could have done something different. I could have done it. And I remember Jacob Harris before the finals match. I was so nervous. I'm running around. And I don't know if you know Jacob Harris.
I do, yeah.
He's sitting there. He's going for his 3rd state title. And he's like, you all right, man? Need to calm down.
He's so chill.
I'm nervous.
That dude's so chill.
Yeah.
Like, was he like that in high school too?
Oh, yeah. He would walk out to a wrestling match just kind of, out there just like he was about to go say hey to somebody, on the street. And then he'd just flip a switch and go after people. And even at UTC, he just, hey, man, Jacob Harris, that was just him. What you see is what you get. But God, that guy was good. And I just remember being so, like, my first time in the state finals, just being so freaked out, and him just being like, just calm down, man. It's another match. But yeah, after that loss to Pitts, I grew a lot from just how he wrestled and how he felt and what he did and how he kind of tricked me into stuff. I mean, it was like he'd go one way and I'm thinking, oh, this is where I need to go. And he set it up. He wanted me to go there. And I was like, it was different. So me and Josh started training, and it kind of, we were already training insane, but it was like, okay, now we have 365 days and we're going to take every day we can. And so we just started working out, and it was usually me and Josh, my brother, most of the time. But whenever we had like team practices, and Josh Flynn and Barrett Blankenship and those guys, Brian Bowen, we were all around the same size. And these are just monsters. They're really good on top, and they're really good on their feet. Like Josh Flynn was like Kyle Dake. You could not take him down. You get to his leg and he would just stuff every takedown. And when he got on top, you could not. He won it. Josh Flynn won state. My sophomore year, I got second. Flynn was a freshman and wins the state tournament, and really should have been the first 4-timer in ring gold. He got sick, got mono his sophomore year. But before he got mono, he went to the J-Rob camp and came back, and he was tech falling guys that were 3-time state champs like it was nothing. And I was like, man, this guy, there's nobody going to touch him. Well, he got mono, went from 160 to like 138. I mean, he got super sick. And not that that's an excuse. You should have still won, Flint. No. but it was like we had guys like that in the room, and it was special. And Coach Broom was putting us through these crazy practices. It was very similar to Brand's intensity-wise. I mean, he just put us through great practices, and you have a handful of guys that are just out to kill each other. I mean, we were best friends, but in the practice room, there was this unspoken rule is like, you don't hold back on anyone. And it was interesting to see how quick that team grew. By my junior year, I think we were second in state as a team, and really going from nowhere. I mean, we started my sophomore year, we didn't hardly, we had a few state placers, me and my brother and Flynn. I think that was it, and it was like, but the team just took off after that.
Man, if you go right now, and you've been there, you were there. I mean, dude, you left us. Now, I will say that you left us again.
Yeah.
Bryson brought that up the other day. He's like, he left us again. But
yeah, I'm still in ring gold. I'll still be around.
But we, if you look on the wall, right, and it bothers me, right, to this day, because I'm a super fan, man. I play football there, but I'm a super fan, and I'm looking there, and it says, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, I think, and then 2008. And then it stops.
Yeah.
And then it stops. And I'm like, Okay. And you think about the two guys that led that program during those like heyday years for Ringgold Wrestling. Dude, they couldn't have been like I remember Billy Broom, and he left and went to Gordon Lee for a while.
Yeah.
And of course we all remember Phil, like everybody remembers Phil. But they were so intense. They were intense people, and I don't think. And if you look at training centers and clubs and things in our area, the most successful ones have like an intensity factor to them. Like they just do. And like, Russell up there at Minion, dude, he's intense, man. Like he's running this Minion club. And you look at Boskin, like have you ever seen Josh Boskin coach a camp or a clinic or anything?
Oh yeah.
I love Josh. Yeah, I love Josh too. But if you look at him, like you walk in, you watch like when every year Bryson goes up to the Boston camp over the summer, and all the best kids in the Tennessee area come, and Georgia, Alabama, and you'll see him just screaming and do this, and then and he doesn't baby anybody, right? There's no it's very to the point, and I think that there's a lot can be said for that. And dude, I think that's something that's kind of been missing in our area for a while, and I think Derek Murdoch's doing a good job of trying to bring it.
Oh
back.
yeah, they won the state duels last year at the middle school. They had a really good team, man. Those kids were something else. I mean, Bryson was on that team, so you saw firsthand, and we had guys like Luke Jones, and just everybody on the team was a goer.
There's pieces, and to call out Luke Jones, man, he's getting to play some varsity football as a freshman.
Yeah, that guy, I wrestled him, and he feels like a college wrestler. Like I could put him against somebody at UTC, and I'm pretty confident he'd handle him. As an 8th grader, I was like, this guy is something special. Like, watch out for Luke Jones in the wrestling world. I don't know if he's going to lose a high school match if he,
I think it depends on weight, really. Like if he can stay down, I don't know what he's weighing. Like I'm assuming he'll probably
he could heavyweight 160. It don't matter for that guy.
I can see that too. I've always been under the assumption, like when you're a freshman, because I always think like, there's a big difference between, like for instance, 140-pound 9th grader and 140-pound senior, like in terms of like physical development. So I think it kind of, I think if you can wrestle like at a high level like that, you can compete and you may win, right? Like, I mean, it's possible. Yeah. But like, with him in particular, you're probably right because the kid is strong, man. Like he's strong. So like
he's strong already.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's something that's kind of been missing there in Ringgold. And I think Murdoch's kind of bringing it back. And he actually branched out with that middle school group, and I was like, wow, this is awesome because like you don't see any of them other coaches in that area doing that. So he kind of branched out. We like wrestled Jefferson and like some other teams like in middle school.
Yeah, Murdoch does a really good job. He's the guy for that program. I hope that, and I like how they were mixing last year the middle and the high school practices a lot. That was
I mean that should be a staple for any program, though, right? Like I think anyway. I think any successful program like should combine. Now Cleveland, we always talk about Cleveland, but they're on two sides of the county, right?
Yeah.
Like the middle school's on one end and the high school, the Jones Center's on the other side of the city. So that probably doesn't happen in that scenario. But in general, like you see, like, successful programs, a lot of them are meshing that way. Because you might have a kid that's in 8th grade that should be wrestling with a junior, right? That needs that development time. So there's a lot to be said for that. We kind of got off topic on our hometown here, but 2-time state champ, you put in the work. You were breaking into wrestling rooms.
Yeah, we had it figured out how to get into places.
So did you ever go to like a training center or anything like that through high school?
We couldn't, we had a single mom for most of our lives, and it was hard for her financially to get us into places. We never could really go to a club, and they didn't have any in North Georgia. There really wasn't a whole lot back then, and we did try to go to Fargo and get the scholarships to send us to Fargo, but it was a very political process, like a lot of things. So we never really got the chance to do the big tournaments. We tried to raise money and save money to go, but it was just, it's a, when you're a kid trying to pay $1,000 for a tournament, it's hard to manage that. So we did as much as we could. And we did get to travel to, we go to nationals. We went, my brother Josh actually won nationals. He was the first ring wrestler I know of to win high school nationals.
NHSCA.
We went to nationals, NHSCA nationals in Winston-Salem, and Josh won. And I mean, it was like he hadn't even won state yet. This was because Josh got third in state, then he got second. He didn't win state till his senior year, but he wins a national tournament because that was the kind of work me and him had been putting in, was just nonstop wrestling all the time. And I could remember at that tournament watching him wrestle and how high level he was, down blocking and doing all these crazy things. And I was just laughing at how far we came in such a short time, just in a few years. It was such a God thing. And I remember after he won that tournament, he wins nationals and he goes, I feel like I just won state, because that was our first goal, was to win state. And, and one of the coaches there goes, dude, you just won nationals.
Yeah, dude.
Laughing about it. But
when you go back to a built-in practice partner,
yeah,
you never see a twin that's not good at wrestling.
Yeah,
they're the same person, and you can see that. Like, he's winning high school nationals as a junior, right? This
junior? Or going into it was our senior year in the preseason. Yeah.
Okay, preseason, senior year, and then, dude, he wins a state title the next year. You win your junior year, then your senior year. How do both of you, after putting in, and that's epic, dude, because I grew up in a single mom situation. Like, I've told the story before where I borrowed the neighbor's bike and put it back every day so I could get to football practice.
Yeah.
So, like, I get that, man. Like, if I was wrestling when I was young, I would have never got to go to Tulsa or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we were lucky. We had, like, a good friend of ours, Jake Crockett. His dad would take us to freestyle tournaments and stuff. And I'm like, thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means to us to get to travel to different tournaments. And he took us to nationals the year before Josh won it. And both me and Josh both took third that year. And I was like, it was, and I was like, I'm thankful for that opportunity that we got to go see those, get exposure, because for us, we craved competition. We wanted to wrestle the best, but it was so hard to do,
Yeah, especially in that time period too, right? Because, like you said, there wasn't a lot in North Georgia or even really in Chattanooga at the time.
At that time, Georgia wrestling nationally was kind of seen as a joke. It was like, you get a Georgia kid and you're like, oh yeah, easy win. So we had to beat the stigma back then of Georgia kids. And I remember we wrestled Oklahoma State, first duel our freshman year with Brands. Well, our redshirt freshman year, of course. And my brother Josh at 133 has a 2-time returning champion, Johnny Thompson. And Johnny Thompson was second as a freshman, won it as a sophomore, won it as a junior. He's going for his third national title for Oklahoma State. And that was back when Oklahoma State was the #1 team. They were beating everybody. And Josh is going out, and before the match, everybody's shaking hands, and they said, Josh Keefe from Ringgold, Georgia. And I remember seeing Johnny Thompson kind of laugh, like, at first. And then Josh upsets him and beats him in the duel. And it's Josh's first college match, and he beats the #1 guy, probably pound for pound at the time. And I remember Josh felt like he wrestled bad. So after the match, he punches the mat, but you can hear the fans kind of being in shock. Like, he won. They were in shock that it happened. I think a lot of people were, but it was just, that was the mentality we had, was like, we were supposed to win. We don't know any different. And people would say, like, what are your goals when we got to UTC? Like, what do you want to do? And we're like, we're going to win 4 national titles. And they're like, oh, no, maybe All-American here and there, but don't, and they would try to talk us out of it. And I think it's funny how the world tries to talk you out of what is something when it sounds that crazy,
If you Mark Henry's a WWE guy. I don't know if you know who that is, but he was a wrestler a pro wrestler back in the the 90s, early 2000s. And I seen a Facebook reel a while back, and the greatest quote I ever heard was this. His son was powerlifting and wrestling and playing football and all these things. And he says, he works so hard. He says, and he tells me, he says, Dad, he says, even if I never meet any of my goals, I'm better than everybody that didn't try.
Yeah.
So it's like not putting like a glass ceiling on what you can accomplish. Like, and you see that a lot. And dude, I'm guilty of it. I've done it before. Like, Bryson wrestled Freddie Brockman at Super 32 last year. Freddie Brockman's won Super 32 8 times.
Wow.
Okay? 8 times. And yeah, it didn't go well, right? Like it didn't go well. Probably one of the best top 5 kids in the country. And I probably emphasized that to him, like leading into the match, right? Like I should have been like, bro, he's human, I should have approached it that way. But I remember I'm like, I don't know, man. You just need to wrestle smart, Like,
That's the hardest thing about getting your mind to truly believe that you're going to do something big, you're going to pull off the upset, is you got all those voices like, hey, just try, hey, the best you can do is just go out there and try. And you're like, I'm going to win. You have those doubter voices, and the hardest doubt to ever overcome is the one in your own head, telling you how good somebody is.
Oh yeah, dude. Like even in that match, they had a couple good little scrambles, and then the kid took him down, and he catches like a cross wrist, and he starts tilting him. But when he goes to tilt him as they're rolling through, he could have easily stuck him. Like we went back and watched it. I said, dude, all you had to do was grapevine him right there. It's over. You would have shocked the world. He's like, dude, I was thinking that, and I was scared to try. And I was like, So it's that belief that you had going in, saying, hey, dude, I'm gonna be even if you don't reach that, the striving to get there, you're so much better than everybody who didn't even try to get there. And so what was the process like for you guys to come, like from being from a small town like Ringgold, and you won a couple state championships between you, and he won high school NHSCA, and you placed a few times. How did that correlate to getting you guys to UTC? How was the recruiting process?
Yeah, it was, like I said before, our whole wrestling career was just a God story. I mean, I was praying. I had terrible grades. Josh had terrible grades. We were not recruited by anybody, outside of the area. And I could remember praying to God and I was trying to just figure out, where am I going to go? Because I want to be a national champion. I have to be one. It was just the next thing I had to do. And I was praying, and as I was praying, I was seeing Iowa, because I was a big Iowa fan. Me and Josh watched the Dan Gable Competitor Supreme documentary with, where Dan Gable wins the 72 Olympics and trains all these hours a day. And Iowa back then was just the greatest program. And, they still are one of the greatest programs. Yeah. And we were huge fans of Tom and Terry Brands. Like we wanted to be like the next Tom and Terry Brands. Right. So,
and I forgot that on the twin thing. I haven't mentioned them. Yeah. I don't know why, dude. Yeah, there you go. Okay, continue. Yeah.
So I remember just being obsessed with Iowa wrestling, and especially the Brands, because, they won 2 world championships. And I was like, hey, these 2 guys are so intense. They're so crazy. I love their style. We wanted to mold ourselves to be kind of like them. And out of the blue, I didn't even know I was getting a phone call. Somebody calls our house, our landline back then, and I answer the phone. And he's like, hello. And then I'm like, hello. And he's like, this is Terry Brands. And I'm thinking I'm getting pranked by somebody. I'm like, Dad, who is this? And the seriousness in his voice of like, what? When he questioned me, I was like, yes, sir. And I realized he's like, and all he said was, hey, if I asked you to run through a wall, would you do it? And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, all right. And that was the phone call, and I was like, is that really him? And then somebody, another coach we used to have, said, man, I talked to Gable and Brands, and they said they wanted to see you guys wrestle. They're interested in recruiting you. And it was just a word of mouth. A coach at Macaulay, I think when Brands was coming to Chattanooga, he was asking local coaches, like, who are the good kids? And a few coaches had mentioned there's these Keefe brothers, and they're pretty tough, and they're not blue chips, but they're tough. And so he came and watched us wrestle at national duels in Camp Jordan Arena. And after that match, I think he kind of decided he wanted us because he saw how we wrestled. And Josh wrestled Brent Metcalf's brother, Chase Metcalf, who was the #1 ranked high schooler at the time, who passed away a few years later, sadly, but in a car accident. But Josh and Metcalf had this epic 13-15 match. And I think that kind of put him on the map a little bit with Brands. And we were beating guys that were good that day. And that kind of helped us get recruited in there. But really, it was more with Brands. It was, will you work hard? He didn't care if you won or you lost. It was, do you hate losing? And will you do whatever I say? And I think with Terry, it was that simple. He didn't care if you were he recruited a state runner up from Montana because he hated Wayne French, he said, I saw how bad he hated losing. I knew we had to have him. He was very different in terms of recruiting. He just looked for character and heart. That's all he cared about.
Dude, so you had this that's an awesome story. The whole, hey, we run through a wall. Cool. Thanks. All right. That's pretty cool. So you get there, everything, worked out the way it did. You get there, you still have you and your brother together at UTC. Yeah. So you still have your built-in practice partner, but now you have a big variety of practice partners.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt's already there, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a couple of years since you've kind of put your hands on Pitts. How did things change in the practice room, or did they change when you got there throughout your time?
No, he was even better than when I wrestled him the last time. And it was a very humbling experience, because I felt like coming into the practice room, I'm going to beat all these guys, and I'm already working to be the best in the world. This will be nothing. And there was a different strength. Everybody was so good. And I could remember the takedowns that used to just work all the time. I was just getting hung up, stuck underneath trying to fight from a base. And it was just every day was a tough battle. And I remember wrestling with Terry Brands. Like, me and Josh so looked up to him that it was hard to wrestle him and not fixate on, oh my gosh, this is Terry Brands, but he would wrestle everybody in the room that was around that side. He would wrestle the heavyweight, Brands would. He was still very fiery in his coaching. So got to wrestle him a lot. And that was fun, because, he'd say, hey, you want to wrestle this week? It'd be like a Saturday, he'd be like, hey, you want to go wrestle? And I'd show up and we'd wrestle for like an hour straight, and he'd just keep going and going. And you're thinking, this is never going to end. But it was a lot of fun. But yeah, wrestling Pitts, man, I really wish, looking back, Pitts and my brother and me, we were all going to go up a weight, because Pitts making 25 sucked so much strength out of him. I remember thinking, like, we're all decided we're going to do it, but then we got talked into going back and staying down. And that's where I think, as a wrestler, sometimes you respect your coaches, but you got to know, if you're going to win the national tournament, do whatever that takes. And that'll help the team more than anything. I think Pitts at 33, me at 40, Josh at 41, me at 49. I think we're a better team, better wrestlers. We all three, All-American or win nationals. And, hindsight's 2020 going back.
Matt had said that to me. He said that, dude, I was on a 5-year diet.
Yeah.
And he said, I tried to bump up, and he said Brands didn't want it. And he wanted me to stay put. And he said, dude. But he also told me some crazy stories. And I've heard multiple crazy Terry Brands stories from Quantal and Pitts now. And, most of them were like, Quantal was big on the whole, you hadn't wrestled in a while, or, whatever. And he just randomly would be like, hey, be on weight tomorrow. And then, Matt was like, dude, he'd drive us out to Flintstone and just like leave us in the dark and say, I'll see y'all later.
Yeah.
And so give me one from your perspective that was off the wall that, was like, dude, really? But it was like factored into how he kind of did things.
Yeah. Like with big tournaments, usually there's like, especially nationals, you kind of hold back. Guys don't go as hard. They're getting ready for something. They do practice pretty hard. But like, I remember thinking, we're going to taper off. We're going to the NCAA tournament. It's the year that I All-American, the last year Terry was at UTC. He's put me through this crazy workout. And I remember doing sprints and doing the Aerodyne bike. And he had me doing these hammer curls with these heavy weights. And it was you would have never thought it was the week before nationals, or, the days before that. And I remember, mentally, I always convinced myself, anytime I sprint, it's going to be full sprint. There's no holding back. And it was one of those things, like, if I have to do a rope, it's going to be full go. There's no holding back. So I didn't have an off switch to that. It was like, I don't taper off. I go as hard as I can, because I want to train myself. That's what I'm going to do in a match. I have to do that in practice, because if I hold back, it's going to show, so I'm doing this practice, and he's having me sprint and do all these things, and I wasn't holding back. And I remember lifting the weights, and I just start going numb. I'm sweating. And there was one practice where I literally lost 12 pounds in one practice. And that sounds impossible, but if you saw what we were doing, I mean, that's a gallon and a half of sweat, I knew what I weighed before practice, and I was 3 pounds under after practice. So I was 9 pounds over, and I left 3 pounds under. And I remember just, but it was like in that practice, I remember going as hard as I could lifting these weights. And we had a big trainer that John Mazurek. He was a UFC fighter actually, and he beat Dan Severn. This guy was legit.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. Actually,
yeah, he was a really good athletic trainer. He was this big heavyweight guy, and he would roll around with us sometimes. But anyway, I remember collapsing and Terry screaming at me to get up, and John picks me up, and I remember him just picking me up and going. He was afraid of what would happen if I didn't listen, but it was like I was collapsing, doing all these, just from exhaustion. I didn't faint or anything, but I just remember my body went numb and I hit the ground, and he picks me back up and carries me to the bike, and I get back on it. And then I'm starting to try to do it again. But I just remember thinking, like, this is insane. And I go to the national tournament and I feel like I'm in recovery. I'm like, I'm trying to warm up, and I'm like, and I'm so tight and sore, and all these kids are bouncing around fresh, and I'm like, must be nice. But I when in the matches, I never got tired. My legs never got tired. My conditioning, I never, it wasn't like, I should have won if I had tapered off. Terry knew what he was doing, and I trusted that. And but for me, one of the big things I think it was the fact that I became, I talked about before my freshman year at UTC, I became a born again Christian, right? So me and Josh weren't going out and drinking. We weren't sleeping around. We were reading the Bible, praying together, and all that stuff. That was, to me, that was most of the battle, because I saw so many good wrestlers get sidetracked, and get distracted. And high school kids too, get distracted by the extracurriculars, or the ladies or whatever it is. And, but I was always, I had always had my priorities not straight. It was wrestling, and then family, and then God somewhere, back in the past. But then as I started realizing it's God first, God has to be your every step, your schoolwork, your everything, so I started praying to God and asking God for things, and verses really, God hasn't given you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. All these verses started really resonating with me and Josh. When we prayed, we would ask God, free us of fear, and it was like an instant switch. And I could remember always being a head case and looking at brackets, like I'm sure Bryson is probably like, or maybe, even parents are like, oh, my kid's got this guy in the next round. I remember losing in the Midlands tournament in Brands. I wrestled the number one guy from Iowa, and I lost 7-4. And I remember leaving the match thinking I'm not tired, but I'd stressed over who I was going to wrestle. I wrestled different because I was trying not to lose, right? It was like it was something held me. That fear held me kind of not at my best. And I remember Terry was sitting up beside me in the stands after that, and he said, "What's holding you back?" And it kind of made me look at myself. And he said, "Seriously, man," he said, "What's holding you back?" And I knew it's like the fear, the doubt, the voice of, you shouldn't beat this guy. He's the number one guy, but just try to win. Just try. And that day, Terry had me. I was eliminated from the tournament, and Terry had me in this area where there's a swimming pool, and it's me and Terry hand fighting, and there's a couple other guys in there kind of working out. But I remember there's this big glass window at this hotel where all the people in the lobby can see into the swimming pool area. And me and Terry look like we're trying to kill each other. Like we're hand fighting like crazy. And he is trying to drive me into this swimming pool. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to hold back, period, at all anymore. And me and him started hand fighting real hard. And I remember just feeling a certain freedom of not holding back anymore, not letting fear or doubt or whatever. And after that hand fighting session, it was like, I think Terry kind of realized then I had discovered something, like I wasn't holding back. And I made up my mind that day. I was like, I'm never going to look at another bracket. I'm not going to think about who my opponent is. So the next weekend, we wrestled Missouri and Ohio State. Now, typically, I would be looking at who I got. This guy's ranked 12th. He's ranked whatever. He's really good. What's his stats? I would stress over it. I didn't look at a bracket. I didn't know who I had to wrestle. I didn't care. And I remember going out and absolutely destroying Missouri and Ohio State, two teams that I would have respected and been afraid to, really go all out. And that freedom of just being fearless and having God first and not worrying about it, it was such a good feeling. And I remember just going on a win streak after that, because I was like, man, this is great. I don't even have to look at a bracket, I don't have to worry about it. And, of course, my freshman year at nationals, I went 0-2 because I started letting, oh gosh, now I got to win nationals. And it was like a pride thing. I got to do good because of me and all of my work. And it started being about me again. And after I lost at nationals my freshman year, I made up my mind, like, if it's not just about God, I'm not going to, it's not worth it. It's like I put wrestling up there where it had to be me, and it had to be my, me this, me that, me that. And it's like, it wasn't fun. You start trying just not to lose because of pride. And yeah, so, my sophomore year, I really focused on just dedicating everything to God, wrestling with the freedom of fear and doubt, and I remember going to nationals, and everybody be like, "You want to know who you got in the first round?" And I'm like, "No." Like, "You don't want to know?" I'm like, "I don't want to know." And second round, I wrestle the returning NCAA finalist, Matt Murray from Nebraska. He had finished second the year before. I didn't know I was going to wrestle him. I'm getting warmed up, and I hear his name, Matt Murray from Nebraska. And I'm like, and it's like that. That's the national finalist. And I remember getting nervous again. And I went back in this back room and I started praying, and I just got peace. And I'm like, I knew I wasn't supposed to win the match, but I remember just praying and saying, "God, free me of fear, free me of doubt." And I just heard this voice just say, "Hey, the history books haven't been written yet,
Right.
Go and change the history books." And I remember thinking, that's right. Everybody kind of thinks this guy's predetermined to win, but it's open for anyone. And I think that's what, God kind of showed me was fearlessness is what God's called us to be, not wrestlers who go out indecisive and worried and having doubt. Like, you have more fun when you wrestle that way,
Oh yeah. Well, who won that? Did you win the match?
Yeah, I ended up beating him, and he rode me like a dog. I got ridden probably 4 minutes out of the 7, but when we were on our feet, it was just, I remember hand fighting as hard as I could and taking shots. I scored a couple of really good takedowns, and but he rode me like crazy. And in the last minute of the match, I had to get away and score to win. And I remember just, even though I felt like on bottom, I couldn't move an inch. I was just here, inch here, inch there. I couldn't get my hips up. My head was getting slammed down, and he felt like he weighed 300 pounds, and his pressure was so unique. And, but I remember thinking, don't stop fighting, keep moving. He'll break. And right at the very end, like 15 seconds left, I did some weird cartwheel Granby out and got behind him. And I remember when I got behind him, he just laid there. He didn't get up, and time ran out, and he was crying. And I was like, I broke him from bottom, which is hard to do, but it was just that, what God told me was just, all you can do is just wrestle as hard as you can without fear, and good things will happen. It's just kind of like a spirit. It was a spiritual thing. It was one of those things where me and Josh kind of learned that God was everything. We had to put him first, and wrestling was just second, and wrestling was just something we did for God. It took the pressure off of us because we weren't trying to just win because we wanted to win. It was like, whatever we find our hands to do, we're going to do it with all our heart and all of our soul and all of our might, and wrestling was just that other thing. And that kind of made it more fun, I think, for me and Josh both.
Well, when you don't have that pressure, and, over the years, I can so correlate with everything you just said as a, from a father's perspective.
Yeah.
I've seen him when he's, you can tell in his face when, okay, I'm worried about this, and it usually doesn't go well.
Yeah.
You see it in his face where he just doesn't care, and it's like, okay, we're on to something. So that, realistically, and I've said this before too, it's like, you try to get the most out of the sport that you can, right? Like, you have to be one of the one to make, millions and millions of dollars and win an Olympic medal and all that stuff. But there's so much you can take from it. And, and you're very spiritual, and I love that. And, if you can use it also as a vehicle, right, to, reach people and things, that's an amazing story too. So your sophomore year, you go 0-2 your freshman year. Your sophomore year, you beat a national finalist. I guess you get knocked out though, right, in the blood rounds.
My sophomore year was the year I All-Americaned. Actually, I
thought it was the next year. Okay.
No, I beat Matt Murray of Nebraska. I beat Tommy Owen in the first round from Minnesota, and then Matt Murray, Nebraska, in the second round. In the third round, I had a guy named Josh Torella. And Torella was from Michigan, really good wrestler from Michigan. I think he was the number 3 seed at the time that year. And I don't think he had lost. I may be wrong about that. But he was a tough match for me. But I just remember having so much peace in that match, and just knowing, like, I knew I was going to, I'd already kind of believed, I believed I was going to win the national tournament that year. So he was just another match. And I remember watching him wrestle. I was watching some film somebody showed me. They were like, "Hey, you want to watch your weight class? It's like the 141-pound finals of some big tournament." And it was Torella. And I was watching him, and I remember thinking, "Oh, he shoots to this side. I'll just kind kind of keep that leg back. And I remember thinking, if I ever wrestle this guy, well, here I am wrestling this guy. And so it was kind of funny that random match somebody showed me in study hall, like, hey, here's the guy you're in your weight class is the best right now. And but me and him, one of my weaknesses was holding people down. Well, if I win in the quarterfinals, I'm in the semis. And I wasn't thinking of it like that. I was just focusing on one thing, just wrestle your best, be fearless. But I can remember in that match, he was really good on top. He rode me like crazy too. Torella, their whole family are like leg riders, crossbody riders and stuff. But I had to score a takedown in the last period, and there was probably 20 seconds left in the match. And I get in on the leg, and I'm holding up a single leg. And I remember this position thinking, I got to score here. I just got to calm down. Don't panic. Score the takedown. And I end up scoring a takedown right on the edge. And it's like, okay, now there's 15 seconds left. I got to keep him down or it goes to overtime because he had a ride time point. And one of my weaknesses was always, if there was 10 seconds left and I had to hold somebody down, they got away. And Coach Brands couldn't stand that. He'd be like, why can't you ride anybody? It was just, I'm a takedown guy. And when I get on top, my hips are terrible. It's just off to the side. But I remember walking back with just that, my prayer life was so good that I just had so much peace that it was like, here goes. And I didn't panic. And I remember he tried to gram me out and all this stuff. And the clock ran out. And whenever I got my hand raised, it was just like this, the closeness I felt to God in that moment was just like a thankfulness, like, thank you, God. Cause I knew without his peace and without his presence, it would have been a different match,
That's awesome, man. Yeah. To go from ninth grade, being pulled from the hallways basically and say, hey, try this. And you were probably going to drop out of high school to becoming an NCAA All-American in basically your hometown, right? Like Chattanooga, Ringgold's the same. Yeah. And then to get a degree, graduate, become a teacher, which you're like phenomenal at math from what I understand.
Oh,
no.
I teach it. I'm not good at it. I failed in high school, so.
Bryson said you helped him a lot last year, man, like when he was struggling with stuff.
He could probably tutor me if he wanted to.
I don't know, man. 2 + 2 is 5 to that kid. But dude, like the whole scenario, man, is so awesome. And I want to close up with this because I know you were at Ringgold again, and at some point we'll get you back. But for the time being, you are starting. I think this is something cool you can talk about to close up the show today. You're starting up the first wrestling team for the new school in Dalton. Correct?
Yeah, Dalton Academy.
Okay, so how did that kind of happen? And like, and Steve was telling me, because I guess his wrestling team's kind of being split up too, right? At Dalton High School because of like new zoning restrictions.
Yeah, they just zoned. Used to Dalton Academy was like a school of choice. You could choose to go there, but then they realized they kind of had to zone to make it an official high school. You have to zone everything, and it's a single A school, only 400 kids, a little over 400, maybe 430 or 40. Much smaller than Dalton High. I think we are single A this year. But yeah, I was going there, and they weren't supposed to start wrestling until next year. But it's like I kind of try to find out where's God leading me to go. And I was teaching these kids in my third grade class, and I heard God plain as day say, "You need to coach these kids." And I was like, okay. And the next day I heard the same thing. It just in my spirit, God said, you need to coach these kids. And I was like, God, if you want me to coach these kids, let me know. And that morning I was kind of praying that to God. And the athletic director came to my room, Mr. Boland, and he said, hey man, can you come talk to me, in my office later on? I said, sure. We go down there, and he said, look, our principal Ashlock wants us to start a wrestling program. Would you be interested in doing it this year? I know it's last minute, you don't. And I said, man, God's been putting this on my heart. I was like, I'm all for it, man. I'd love to. And it was one of those crazy things where I was like, what am I getting myself into? But, it's going to be fun. I'm really excited. We got like 23 kids signed up right now. I think it's going to be more than that, hopefully, that come out.
And out of those 400, is that 6 through 12? Is that what
it's 9 through? It's just the high school 9 through 12 now.
Oh, okay.
They did have like 10 through 12, but they added freshmen this year.
Okay. So you're actually coaching high school.
Yeah.
Okay. See, when I seen that, I thought it was a middle school team. Okay.
Oh, no, it's Dalton Academy is the new high school there. They were trying to make Dalton High School smaller, and the Dalton Academy was to kind of funnel some because it's getting overcrowded over there, and they're in like the big boy leagues like 6A, and it's hard to travel that much at Dalton High for the region tournament to drive 2 hours away. You know?
Oh yeah. Gordon Lee did that a couple years ago where they were bumped to 2A, and then they asked to be bumped to 3A to compete where it was more local because all the 2A schools were like 4 hours away at the time. How the alignment, you know.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I'll tell you, man, I love chatting with you. You're one of my favorite people. You've always been so nice and respectful, and always been a good friend. And man, I wish you nothing but the best at Dalton Academy, and I'm sure we'll see you at the state tournament and things this year. Again, now that I know it's a high school team, dude, that's awesome. And I suggest I'm gonna throw this out here because I do it on every episode when I'm talking about coaching and stuff. Man, get a club rolling over there. Get some kids in the room. Yeah. You know, that'll funnel up really fast. You know, and if you need any kind of resource, you know, if I can help in any way, I will. I want everybody to succeed. I'm that kind of guy.
Yeah.
But episode 18 has been pretty awesome. We learned.
Yeah, man. And, I want to say too, I'm a big fan of you guys. You and the boys. I've been following Bryson for a long time. It's funny how Facebook shows you the same people, but yeah, just your testimony and your story and how you've overcome the adversity. Because you know, like that's the whole side of my family. That's the kind of stuff that we've overcome, and it's tough, you know. And God's got a ministry for you. He's gonna take you places you never thought you could go, you know, for sure. And being a single parent and a dad, that's tough. Yeah.
I had an epiphany today, and I told you off camera I'm having kind of a rough week.
Yeah,
but I had an epiphany today of something that eventually I think I want to do with Bmoney Beastin. I want to, you know, we were producing shoes and we've helped a lot of underprivileged kids. I think I want to start like a nonprofit kind of extension to Bmoney Beastin.
Yeah.
And I want to like accept shoe donations and headgear donations and things like that. And I want to send them to, you know, underprivileged, low income areas. And I want to help. I think like truly that's my calling is, I feel like now that I'm doing this and we're starting to gain a little bit of traction and I'm starting to feel what I'm good at. I feel like I'm good at building things. I think that's like my calling, and really I don't want anything out of it. I just want to like help people like I was and like you were. And, you know, and really like I always said this, and I don't know if you agree with it, but adults make their own decisions, but kids are a product of their environment. So if we can give them opportunities to maybe not, you know, I know vaping's a big thing right now. Maybe they don't vape. Maybe they wrestle. Maybe they don't go out drinking. Maybe they wrestle. You know, just like you guys, you are about to drop out of high school. Dude, I dropped out of high school with 6 weeks left to do drugs and chase girls. So like, dude, you know, that's what I think my calling is. And eventually I think I want to do that. I've even had some conversations with some like guys that sell shoes on like Instagram. And I was like, man, if you have anything that you can't sell, send them to me and I'll get them to somebody. So maybe that'll happen in the future. But I truly appreciate the kind words, man. I do the best I can with Bryson Noah. He's something different, man. You know, like he'll be a freshman this year, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, you know. But dude, much love to you, brother. Episode 18, Michael Keefe, NCAA All-American, 2-time Georgia State champ. Awesome dude, Ring Gold alum. Appreciate the time, brother. We'll do it again at some point.
Yeah, let's do it again, man. Maybe next time we'll get Josh on here too.
Absolutely, dude. That would be awesome.
Me and him have some funny wrestling stories we could share.
I'd love to do that. And I also, at some point, dude, we got to do like a Terry Brands like collaborative. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Episode 18 in the books.
All right.